In many ways, nations are like people. Now, identities are based on lies, facts, fictions, truths, fantasies, myths, and contradictory stories that can come together to create something bigger than the sum of their whole parts. Like many people, a nation usually resists engaging in the types of critical self-reflection that would be necessary for it to grow and become more emotionally healthy and mature. It's exactly the type of critical thinking and critical patriotism that America needs in this moment of democracy crisis and other troubles, if it is to escape the fascist dream or nightmare that now envelops the nation. Now, James Baldwin exemplifies this in Notes of a Native Son when he writes, "I love America more than any other country in the world, and exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually." Now, this is no less true on the holiday weekend when we are supposed to be giving thanks for what we have, and in some ways, it may be even more true this year and maybe further on. The story of Thanksgiving origins is one of white settler colonialism and a series of encounters and decisions that would ultimately lead to the defeat or destruction of indigenous people and the widespread enslavement and murder of black people as well as others across North America and the Black Atlantic. Thanksgiving, as a lived experience and a memory for many Americans, is also one of gratitude, generosity, friends, family, and home in its many forms. Now, both these things can be true at the same time. Nations like people are contradictory and messy. Now, historian Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz explains Thanksgiving and how it became a national holiday. Um, the historical context that many people think we have to see in Thanksgiving is that it's a part of that mythology and attempts to cover up the real history of the United States. Actually, Thanksgiving was not introduced as a holiday until Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War. And in his speech, there was no mention of pilgrims and native people, or food, or pumpkins, or anything like that. It was simply a day for families to be together and mourn their dead and be grateful for the living, but they should take Native Americans and the Puritans out of the picture for it to be a legitimate holiday of family festivities and sharing with family and friends. Now, in that spirit, what does Thanksgiving mean in the age of Trump and beyond? And what should the American people be thankful for? Donald Trump and the Republican fascists they were not successful in drowning the American people in the democracy and the red tide during the midterms, but pro-democracy Americans won at least a brief reprieve and an opportunity to reorganize, recharge, and amplify the resistance. Um, I'm thankful that Donald Trump lost in 2020 and that hopefully he will lose again in 2024. It's much easier to confront and defeat the monsters when they are fully exposed and their ambitions or desires are clear, rather than them lurking in the shadows, threatening to pounce at any moment. Basically, people have been reflecting on the words of a musician, composer, and visual artist Brian Eno. In a 2017 interview with The Guardian that he did, he was asked about Trump and the Brexit vote. He says, in retrospect, he says, I'm pleased about Trump and I'm pleased about Brexit because it gives us a kick up the ass, and we need it because we weren't going to change anything. And just imagine if Hillary had won and we had been in business as usual, the whole structure she inherited, the whole Clinton family myth. I don't know that the future that I particularly want, but it just seems that what was grinding slowly to a halt, whereas now with Trump there's a chance of a proper crash and a chance to really think. After a certain amount of blowback in his response to those comments, he would elaborate further on in a subsequent post on Facebook. He says, I will say something that's absolutely clear. Donald Trump is a fucking disaster, and so is Brexit. And with that being said, he said that he thinks it's an even greater disaster that people that live in the U.S. and the UK and increasingly the rest of the world live inside political systems that can produce absurd results like these. Now, my hope, and my only hope really, is that Trump in office will reveal himself for what he really was, and that the public will roundly and unequivocally reject him, which they did back in 2020, and everything that he stands for. His terrible policies, his arrogance, his childishness, his lies, his prejudice, and his small-mindedness, and his racism, basically. And rejecting Trump will also start to take down the whole malignant media political structure that so lovingly nurtured him for so long. Now, for 40 years, we've seen and been sliding into a deepening pit of inequality, fear-driven nationalism, and conservatism, and most people are not noticing that. and Trump's squatting could inadvertently change that. Um, not because he's going to do anything right, but because his election is energizing people to come to grips with the fact that their political system is fundamentally broken and it's time to do something about it. It may have taken almost 6 years too long, but Enos' hopes may finally be coming true here in the United States. As we contemplate the meaning for the 2022 Thanksgiving holiday, I also been returning to what the legendary TV writer and producer Norman Lear, who's a lifelong activist for civil rights, wrote in a recent essay opinion for the USA Today. It's not only common ground that is elusive, but it's common grounding in reality, a common sense of decency, a common commitment to a democratic rule, and the peaceful transfer of power. It often feels overwhelming. I have faith in us, but we have been deeply divided before. We had a fascist movement before World War II, and we had our own apartheid system to dismantle. In the face of stiff and sometimes violent resistance, Americans have lifted up millions out of poverty. They embraced legal equality for women and the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people, and protected the dignity and anatomy of people with disabilities. And they began acting to preserve our planetary home and recognize that we, the people, are a beautiful, multiracial, multi-ethnic, and multi-religious lot. Lear had just turned 100 years old, and he wrote, I don't love that at the start of my second century we must fight to defend so many of the gains that we achieved during the first century. But as a father and a grandfather, he adds, he loves his country and its people too much to give up. We owe one another solidarity. We owe one another solidarity as we assess the economic and political power of the forces that are arrayed against us, and we owe one another a generous measure of appreciation for all the ways that we have made progress toward a more perfect union, even as we recognize that we are far from delivering on the American promise. We weep tears of gratitude for the young people who have made that struggle on their own, but some won magnificent victories this week, some faced heartbreaking losses, and this will always be the case. So, for this holiday season, the American people need to transform thanks and gratitude from passive nouns into affirmative verbs and actions, as Lear puts it, into a renewed patriotism of purpose, of caring for one another and for our democracy. Americans can and should give thanks by doing the work of democracy on a local level and in their personal lives by joining community groups, helping their neighbors in need, and talking to random strangers, and supporting local journalism and the arts, and participating in the public sphere and civil society more broadly. Those actions and others like them can help create the type of social capital and human relationships that will sustain and power the long struggle to defeat American neo-fascism that will still lies ahead of us. And it can build momentum for transformative politics that's aimed at creating a genuine social democracy here in the United States. Now, perhaps most importantly, Americans should embrace the spirit of this contradictory holiday weekend to show gratitude for the fact that they still live in a current democracy, whether it be a troubled one, and still much more imperiled and in need of improvement, and because just a few weeks ago that seemed very much in doubt. So if you like the video, you can give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King. You can also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. If you want to support my work even further, you can donate to my Patreon link, which you can find in the About section of YouTube. And for just as little as a few bucks a month, your donation can help go a long way, and thanks for listening.